So good morning and welcome to today's webinar hosted by 3CLogic. My name is Guillaume Seynov. I am the Director of Marketing at 3CLogic, and I want to welcome all the attendees this morning. We have a great event. We'll be discussing how the contact center space is changing and, more importantly, how to respond accordingly. And with us today, we have Robert Killory. He is the Chief Customer Officer at 3CLogic and brings over 23 years of contact center experience, having built, implemented, as well as managed contact centers in that time. And then, of course, our guest speaker, Art Schoeller from Forrester Research. Art is VP and Principal Analyst at Forrester and supports application development and delivery professionals who plan, build, as well as run unified communications and contact centers, especially as it relates to enterprises. Just a quick few line items here. In the event that anyone would like to submit questions, please do so in the chat box made available to you. And whenever possible, I will pass those questions on to either Art or Robert or both. We are recording this event and we'll make sure to forward the copies to all interested parties afterwards. And then, of course, while I know Art does need to leave at 12, Robert has offered to make himself available beyond the 1 hour time period in the event that questions should go beyond that time frame. So without further ado, and in the interest of time, I want to pass the buck off to Art. Welcome, and Art.
Guillaume, thanks so much, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. First of all, I want to extend a great big thank you to the folks at 3CLogic for sponsoring today's webinar and the opportunity to share Forrester's research specifically on what's going on in a larger customer service. But as we drill down into that assisted service realm of contact centers, you know, what's happening with the technology stack, what's really kind of driving us to make some changes. You know, we want to do sort of the fact versus fiction today of, you know, can cloud help? That's why we've posed it as a question, as opposed to, you know, some folks might go down the path and say that, you know, cloud is the answer. Because again, what we want to do is sort of the fact versus fiction today. The first thing I want to do is, you know, lay in a certain context for all of this and what's happening overall with customer service. You know, first and foremost, Forrester is really kind of leading the industry right now as far as looking at this overall customer experience movement. And I call it a movement because it takes people, process, technology, it takes cultures, it takes management support. And in essence, you know, if the others are doing it and you're not, there's a potential for you to be left in the dust. What you are looking at on this chart is the performance of companies over the 5-year period of 2007 through 2012, which significantly started with the Great Recession and the downturn that really hit in 2008. And as we started to kind of clamber our way out of it into 2012, Forrester surveys no less than 6,000 consumers. We asked them about over 150 different brands that they've had experience or interactions with. And so this data shows who the customer experience leaders are, who the laggards are, and in this case, we've mapped that against their stock performance over that 5-year period. So over that 5-year period, customer experience leaders were able to grow shareholder value by 43%, which is, you know, a phenomenal result. The Standard & Poor's Index certainly took a big dip, but then clambered back, so there was 16% growth over that time period. But the laggards lost 34% in shareholder value. At a very high level, this shows that customer experience and a focus on that is really, really important. We fully understand that, you know, for many of you attending today's webinar, it's, you know, once we get down to, you know, how do we translate that into optimized programs, optimizing processes, investments, and technology investments within our contact centers. But, you know, this is good data to use to really kind of set the context for this dialogue with upper management. And another thing that's really important in terms of customer experience is that, you know, another consumer survey that we do is not just their experience with companies, but what channels do they use? We started using other channels other than voice as long ago as the mid-90s. At the advent of the internet, the advent of the growth of email, predominantly is where we got started for an alternate channel for customer service. But as we added and people were started the ability to do their own research. We see that really those three, talking to an agent, interacting with a website, and sending an email, top three choices that consumers make. And there's some variation amongst generations. As we scroll down and we see contacting a company using Twitter, if we were to parse that data by generation, yes, we do see some, uptick in terms of the classical millennials who are using social channels or text messaging. But we see a number of other channels here that as we're moving into, where we are in 2014, many contact centers today are stepping back and saying, what do these other channels really mean to me? Do web chat? Can I do, better job on social listening and processing specific social media interactions that are service oriented? It's becoming more and more important to really resolve the, call it, multi-channel, omni-channel, cross-channel problem, because that's where your customers are. And increasingly, they're using a high diversity of channels to get done what they need to get done and to get served. In this particular case, it gets even worse when we have consumers who start in one place, go to another, then hop to another, and then that trail gets broken. And so we see that this sort of discontinuity of contextual information about a service request, causes a lot of restart, rework, and more consumers are expecting us as service providers. Well, I was on your website. Well, I sent you a tweet. The agent doesn't know what's on your website. Can you look up the email that I sent you, because I described my situation on that email? So many times it leaves our agents kind of hanging out, say to the customer, well, so what is it you want? And how can I help you? And they have to start all over again. This is not an easy problem to solve within contact centers today, because many of us have individual technology silos. Perspective, we may be doing things differently, and these channels may be managed in different organizations. So, this is kind of a problem for many folks today. And certainly, as we look at the possibilities of moving our technology stack to more of an integrated suite within the cloud, it's a possibility that that may help. Many of you, when we look at it from the people perspective, are starting to move towards more multi-channel. Really amazed at this survey result when we put this out there and got this back in last year, that 30% of the respondents here are saying that all of our agents support multiple channels, as opposed to segmenting traffic. Now, when you get larger, and many organizations have the economies segment emails and social media interactions into different skilled agent pools. But for many folks sort of in the middle of the range, it's a very difficult thing to do, because then that is a suboptimal approach in terms of agent occupancy. But you take the 30% and then the 52% that say most of our agents support multiple channels, that's like 82% of the market of people that we polled about their contact centers are doing a pretty significant level of cross-channel training of their agents and being able to have them move across channels to support customer service requests. Now, another slice of this, so that's sort of the people side of it, I want to look at the technology side. This, for a moment, yes, it's a bit of an eye exam for many of you who are looking at this online, but this is Forrester's model for mapping the maturity of technologies. On the bottom is the phase of a market. When technology gets created, it moves into its survival phase. Some technologies don't make it out of that survival phase, but if they do, this is called the classic crossing the chasm. You get into growth, you get into equilibrium, and then as the technology really matures, it starts on its downward curve of decline. And the red and yellow and green lines indicate sort of the business value. It really is kind of, is it a real niche-y kind of technology? Small market, small adoption in and of itself. Is it sort of a medium range? We look at speech recognition, which is, not really adopted across the board. But then, like our mainstream heavy lifters for contact center technology, like ACD or workforce management or case management, the real interesting thing about this is look at how many of these technologies as individual components are really up there at the top of the maturity curve. And what we typically see happen in the phase of a market like this, just what we saw with CRM, for example, that used to be a number of different components. ERP used to be a number of different components. Manufacturing management systems. There is a consolidation into more integrated suites, and we start to have the suite versus best of breed discussion. And very clearly in the contact center space, take for example what's happened with workforce optimization. We've seen workforce management, quality monitoring, and performance management start to aggregate into integrated suites. So there's this cloud and suite movement happening in parallel. And as we get more to integrated suites, doing cross-channel integration or database management of our operational data, it becomes easier because we're removing a lot of these what I call integration points of pain. And that's really, really important, that freeing up your resources and having a more flexible and scalable set of capabilities allows you to better tune what you're doing to serve customers instead of spending all the time messing with the technology. Because at the end of the day, a very complex contact center with a lot of best-of-breed components, with a lot of integration points, can end up looking like this. A diagram of contact center architecture for a large wireless carrier. Now granted, at a very large end, certainly things get complex anyway just because of scale. So this is perhaps an extreme case, but I use the diagram to make my point about, in the past, 9, 10, 12, 15 different components for our contact centers, and then wiring all that together really, has provided an impedance, a limiter, if you will, in terms of our business agility. And another thing that's going on at the same time is the evolution of how we look at and measure our contact centers. So from a data perspective, we've talked about the people, the technology architecture, but we've moved, and this is sort of a movement over time to right. Started out, say the 80s, we were very focused on efficiency metrics, handle time, speed of answer, how many contacts were we processing, and the occupancy of agents. But we started to turn that in the 90s. Monitoring systems. We started to assess agent performance. We looked at how many times calls were being transferred. We looked at, gosh, are agents logging in when they said they would be in terms of adhering to schedule. To the new millennia with 2000, we really started to see more extensive deployment of customer-facing metrics. I don't think there's a contact center I can walk into today where they're not doing something with customer sat or net promoter score. Whereas if I had to turn the clock back to the 90s, that would have been, maybe 20% are actually capturing that feedback data from customers. And then as we move all the way over to the right, looking, really seeing the overall effort the customer has to take to get their question answered. And looping back as we get better at data management to the actual root cause analysis. Where did that feedback occur? Who was the agent who took the call? How long was it? What things were discussed? So we get deeper customer insight and we can better optimize people, process, and technology. And this data management question that I articulate here is one that's difficult for many organizations. So the classic, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, although sometimes in contact centers we're measuring it many, 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 many different ways, and we have many, many different unique sources of the truth. But we do need, in order to drive great customer experience, an integrated performance data management strategy, and we can feed all the way up from the executives, operational managers, down to individual agents. And one thing that can happen with the cloud, as we look at, I talked about that agent question earlier, if we multi-source or we outsource, what kind of visibility have we had in the past in terms of the performance of our outsourcers when they have completely separate systems, completely separate ACDs, completely separate recording systems, completely separate reporting systems? Certainly the ability to have, to dial in and to listen to call, an export of their operational performance data, but it's different, the mapping is different. if you're managing 60% of your calls in-house and 40% amongst two outsourcers, can you really weave that data together?
Now, if we change gears and look at contact center deployment models,
and we see that the orange line, the share of on-premise becomes less, and we see that the share we'll be using for the contact centers for cloud type as a service grows. Now, is it a 40% shift? No. It certainly is larger when you look at what happens in the 50 to 99 seat centers, and that's what's called out by this call out here, that it's even more pronounced in terms of the shift to the cloud. But there's a lot of momentum towards let a service provider who can provide this capability with the right service levels, run and operate the servers, the software. I can still configure and maintain the queuing and routing and logic and my reporting, but let me free up my staff so someone else can take care of this. And in the case of workforce optimization, going back to that discussion of suite, I wanted to throw in here the idea that if people move their contact center to the cloud, a significant percentage of folks, this is 31%, said, I would move my workforce optimization along or move a part of it, that's 36%. So this idea that where workforce management, for example, would be a sticky application and people wouldn't let go of it, moving to the cloud, there's more of a willingness to say, look, I want the data integrated, I want everyone on the same system, I want the flows to be better organized of where information goes, I'll move this to the cloud. So what are the typical hurdles? In the past, say we're a lot better off than where we were in, say, 2006, 2007, that security, scalability, and reliability were concerns about cloud computing in general. And today, many, if not all, of the cloud service providers have ticked those off and built data centers and implemented the appropriate processes and procedures to secure their data centers, sometimes even to the level where theirs are more secure than perhaps what you might be able to accomplish within your own enterprise. But the hurdle, contact center managers tend to be conservative. There tends to be less churn in that environment because they're busy taking calls. So there is a little bit of an impedance here, a little bit of a slower uptick for cloud than, say, for example, other workloads like email or the success of Salesforce example doing CRM. Supporting real-time communications in the cloud has taken a bit longer, but we are seeing the moment starting to accelerate. And so if you're migrating to the cloud, this is not a lot different than migrating to another platform. All of your rules in terms of contact flow, such as IVR programming, queuing, and routing, your customization of your reports, just the overall change management. So if you sort of take away the idea that it's cloud and insert the idea that it is a migration to a new platform, I mean, generally speaking, that's what's needed to make this migration. The last one here, though, is being able to put in place sort of a test platform where you can test new rules, perhaps look at the operation of new reports, but it's mostly the new rules and see how they process calls. Is there a place to sandbox this before you really move it live and into production? And the key integration points when you move to the cloud, again, some of these are very similar to when you'd be utilizing the same another kind of platform on-prem. But can your agent desktop connect to the cloud service provider for CTI capabilities? Are you using a CRM application perhaps from another cloud provider? So can you build the sort of cloud-to-cloud connectivity required? For the phones on the agent's desks, what is the connectivity for the audio path and also the signaling path into the cloud provider? And are you going to make use of soft phones or what kinds of hard phones? What is all that connectivity to make it all work? And certainly many of the cloud contact center providers may provide an option where they can manage your carrier services for you or resell those carrier services as part of the overall packages. So that connectivity, the service levels with the carriers, the toll-free numbers, the option is there to have that ride off of your existing contract or have your cloud contact center vendor act on behalf of your agent to provide that connectivity. So there's a lot of key integration points to consider, and not the least of which, looking at this, is what's the state of your legacy applications. There may be instances where a piece of what you do, so in this case it's a company that has been using Verizon for their IVR provider, and their contract is not due to run out for another 2 years. So they will keep that as the front end into the cloud contact center. So how do you provide that wiring and connectivity? You may have your own homegrown premise-based billing application, because you may be an outsourcer that provides billing based on actual agent utilization. So this idea of hybrid is one that is really important, and some cloud contact center providers are not as adept at providing this. For example, that it's everything in my data center running on my stack, running on my software, and if you want to integrate to this on-prem stuff or to some other cloud, that's going to be a difficulty for us. So it's one area to look at in terms of when you're evaluating a cloud contact center provider. But the reasons to really consider this, one area where cloud contact centers has been really great is if you have seasonal traffic. Very important in the industry today that we've moved towards sort of a model, that 100, you're contracted for the capacity for 100 agents to log in and to be able to be on calls or emails or whichever contacts are appropriate. And that's not a named license, so that if you're running multiple shifts, those subscriptions are reused by the agent who comes in on the second shift. Or if you're highly seasonal, you can take sort of that, hey, we've got a lot of traffic in the first quarter, we need capacity for 400 agents, but we want to ramp down to pay for only 200. You can do that for the next 3 quarters and adjust your contract with the cloud contact center provider. This is a great option for many folks, because with on-premise equipment, you'd have to build for the 500 agents and have that capacity sitting idle for the rest of the contact centers. So the multi-site agents are in multiple cities with a common infrastructure is a great opportunity for cloud. I mentioned earlier managing your outsourcers. I want to caution you on this rest control from IT, though. A lot's being said today about chief marketing officers or other individuals taking control of their own IT. I'm of the belief that cloud does not obviate the need for your IT staff. There is still an account. Expect what you inspect. Your enterprise architects still need to understand what's there. In the ongoing run state, what is the governance of how that cloud provider performs? So there very clearly, in my mind, is a continuing role for IT here. And I've seen some instances where, look, marketing, disparage marketing at the moment, but, we want the system that best integrates with Salesforce. It's like, well, wait a minute, did you look at the rest of the infrastructure? And it may not have been the right choice. So and I mentioned earlier agility and simplification, and at the end of the day, the refresh and release of new features and capabilities. In the cloud world, we're much more in an agile development mode where new features and new releases are more streamed into the system as opposed to waiting 2 years capabilities. So for my recommendations, or Forrester's recommendations looking at cloud, as you look to upgrade, and some of you may still be on older circuit switching equipment, the move to voice over IP could be a trigger to consider looking at cloud. For larger contact centers, and you've got complex integrations and hybrid architectures, and you need high availability, certainly you need to understand all those piece parts. But, we're seeing over time a movement from smaller to mid-size to even larger contact centers looking at much larger contact centers. It could be a dedicated instance to run their operation, but it certainly is possible. And as I said earlier, inspect what you expect of your cloud contact center provider. For some of you are, of a decent size, it may even be, go to the data center and go on a tour and see what's there. I'm not suggesting that for everyone. I am a little circumspect, though, that I would rather see your organization gain some experience with software as a service with a more straightforward first. say email or say document sharing or something else. Now, not that email isn't mission critical for many organizations, but it doesn't have the performance criteria for real-time voice and those types of connectivity and so on. But your purchasing and sourcing and vendor management team should have an experience with software as a service contracts, which are a subscription as opposed to premise software licenses that have associated maintenance contracts with them, so that as they negotiate and they govern this contract, they'd be able to apply that SaaS experience to what you're doing with your contact center. And don't leave out the risk and compliance team. In many instances, I've seen at the last minute, whoops, wait a minute, we checked with risk and compliance, and oh my God, they're not happy with going to the cloud at all. And it would really disrupt months and months worth of work. Really, that they have the ability to also inspect what they expect of the cloud service providers, data center, their people, their processes, for making sure that everything's secure, and that they're part of the evaluation right from the get-go. So I think that's sort of my portion of the presentation, and I want to kind of shift this over so that Rob can share some of this. I'm just going to get him set up. Nope. Give me just a moment as I make him the presenter.
Thank you, Art. And yeah, I'm going to try and continue on exactly with what we're saying. I think that we have a very excellent starting point here with what I was talked about. And as we look at, core focus for today was, like the title says, planning strategically for this. And I think the key when we look at that is your primary focus as we start this process. Cloud migrations are done for various reasons. I mean, if you take a look here, the survey we did as part of this webinar enrollment goals were. And if you take a look, increasing productivity and lowering total costs were by far the most important aspect. And I think the success or failure of both of those comes down to, first and foremost, your planning for an evolution like this. When you take a look at a migration to cloud-centric operation for your business, the planning for it, identifying the pitfalls, and that everything you set up for it is going to meet your business needs is the only way to succeed on those. You can have the best partners, the best platforms, the best intentions, but if it's not planned correctly, you will never achieve your core goals of increasing productivity and low cost of ownership. Now, when we take a look at where the big pitfalls are with it, first and foremost, the problem people run into when migrating into a cloud infrastructure, whether it is for their actual contact center platform, if it's moving to voice over IP with their existing platforms, it is underestimating the need for proper bandwidth. Now, when I say proper, that's not just sufficient capacity, but it's also sufficient type, and it's planning for what that capacity really is. The way that I usually approach this with customers is I try and understand the premise that you're going into, whether it's your existing call center, if you're building a center, is what is your maximum expected capacity of agents and staff inside a facility. And then when you go to look at your bandwidth needs, you need to talk to the providers and ensure when you establish bandwidth for that the mechanism for bandwidth has the ability, the capacity you need for a full facility. Quite often you'll run into situations where you can have, let's say, 300 agents in a facility, but you're only going to plan on 50, and you're going to, grow into the full 300. Well, you can determine your bandwidth for that first 50, and then when you get into the actual capacity that you buy from them, we just have to make sure that the capacity you buy meets your current needs, but can grow to the actual bandwidth you need for the full facility. Likewise, when you're looking at the bandwidth, you need to really make sure that it is the right type of bandwidth. Quite often people will look at prices and say, okay, well, I can go with a cable modem type or a non-guaranteed bandwidth, And when you're running your critical business solutions on it, it is going to cause you far more harm than any money that you have saved for it. So it really is a case of understanding all the aspects of your business needs and then planning for those. And that is where every situation is unique. There are no hard and fast guidelines for it, but you have to look at what maximum capacity you're going to use, concurrency for it, and the availability. Another aspect on bandwidth a lot of people don't consider is, what does an outage cost me? So if you're bringing in, the best fiber circuit that you can for your facility, what would it cost to have a second fiber circuit in there, or Ethernet over copper or whatever's appropriate for the locale? And if you have an outage in a month, will that outage cost you more than it would cost to have that second circuit? So a lot of times the business, it just doesn't warrant it. If there's a 15-minute outage, your business can handle that, and you extra bandwidth. But you need to really evaluate from a business perspective, what am I going to need? What do I need for redundancy on it? And then can it grow as my business grows? Second key aspect for it is migration planning. Very few call centers or contact centers ever work strictly off of their phone system. There's always a system of record, a business system that is how you accomplish your business. Your contact center solution is very critical. You don't have phones, call center agents can't talk. So you definitely have to have a reliable, scalable phone system, but that's not where most of your business is done. So and planning for having your solutions work with your core system of record, very, very critical. So that's where migration planning is important. Likewise, that system of record, you've got to do. The more you count on your agents to do for it, the more you have a risk of it not being consistent. So integrations have to be agent-centric. If you have somebody that tells you they can do an integration between your platforms without having seen your call center floor, seen your agents work, or talk to your operations staff, I would be hard-pressed to believe that they could do the most optimized integration that you could do for it. Talking about the types of clouds. I mean, cloud is one of those most ambiguous terms out there that, it means different things to different people. There are public clouds, there are private clouds, there are hybrids. And you really have to understand not only what are your vendors offering, but what do you need? Do you have special compliance concerns where you can't operate in a public cloud space, that you have to be in a private space? Or is the primary concern reliability and scalability, and you don't have heavy compliance requirements for it? Again, it's very unique to your individual business and to ensure you're in the right environment for your business. Looking at private clouds or private data centers, they may be the right answer for some people, for others they won't, and the cost of them versus a public cloud may not be warranted. ROI is a huge consideration when you look at your costs. Very little business has 2 to 3 years as far as their needs. Business ebbs and flows. You may get a new contract. You may have very seasonal business, as Art was talking about, where if you're in the tax industry, the first quarter is your lifeblood of the year, and the other 3 are steady state. You may be retail, where you go from middle of third quarter to the first week of January, and then the rest of the year you're getting ready for next holiday season. So the seasonality and the capacity for that is a strong consideration. As I was saying, if you go in and you spend a huge capital expenditure on premise-based equipment, and then it sits idle for 3 quarters of the year, well, a lot of people don't factor that into their true total cost of ownership. And you really need to. You need to determine, is the value there for it? Likewise, that goes back to our original on the bandwidth, that you really have to make sure that you are sizing the capacity or the capability of your bandwidth, and then find out, can you adjust seasonally with your vendors? Do they allow that? Or do you have to factor that cost in across the whole year for your peak need? Obviously, cloud providers such as 3CLogic are designed to flex with your business needs, grow when you need them, shrink down when you don't. And you need to, as you're looking at your TCO, really evaluate that for all the different aspects of your solution. Another important part is looking at the architecture of the solutions you're considering. And the architecture, very seldom is it a single choice. Am I cloud? Am I premise? Or is it a hybrid? And that's where understanding how you will interact. You may have premise-based systems that are part of a larger enterprise that you really can't move to the cloud or don't want to. That's fine. That's when you have to do the evaluation with your technology team. How do I cloud enable those systems, or how do I maintain their operations internally and work with cloud-based platforms? That's where your internal IT team, which I agree cannot bypass or override your IT team on a lot of this stuff, but they have to be active partners in your cloud migration. And by being a partner in that, they can help identify, both for yourself and for your experienced cloud partners, how the architecture of the overall solution will work. Obviously, if you're a cloud-based already, that's much less of a consideration. Those are the big pitfalls for it. So now when you take a look at it, why would I migrate then? There's a lot of good reasons for it. A key one right now is reliability. When you take a look at it, the bulk of investment in technology is going into public or cloud-based infrastructure. And the benefits you get from that, the economies of scale on it, are incredible, especially when somebody else is paying for them. You have to go out and build data centers that match what Amazon Web Services offers, would bankrupt most small and medium businesses. But when you can take that infrastructure, leverage it through your on-demand expense of cloud providers, you can now get the best of both worlds. Likewise, flexibility, as we said, you will not be able to get a premise-based or even some other cloud-based providers that are going to flex month by month with your business. You don't know if you're going to get that contract next month that triples the size of your agent staff. You need to be able to respond in the time the business requires for that. So you need to make sure that your flexibility is there, not just seasonal, but the ebb and flow of your business. As we talked about back in 2008, we had the Great Recession. And depending on who you talk to, we get out of it a couple of years ago, we're still in it, you're not really sure. Well, everyone knows that there's a possibility that things could get bad again. So your business needs to be able to respond. If bad times are good for your business, collections, arena, etc., then you need to be able to surge up as that occurs. If your business is seasonal or based on the economy in general, you may have a situation where you're backing out of capacity while things are changing. So that flexibility is very critical, and you need to make sure that your business decisions around total cost of ownership reflect the agilely address that. Convenience, can't say enough about this. The infrastructure that you do and you build for cloud-based solutions, it keeps it so that you can adjust accordingly with your business. And you don't want to have to worry about how long is it going to take me to get additional phone circuits in or more bandwidth installed. You need to plan in the beginning so that you have the capacity for it, and then as soon as you get the need for it, it can turn up faster than you can hire the new agents or board the new business. Simplification. Again, if you invest 100 hours in development and that saves you 30 seconds per agent per call, the return on that is going to be incredible over the life of your call center. So you need to take a look at simplification from an operational perspective, not from a technology perspective, and ensure that your agents are given the best environment to accomplish their job and get the efficiencies multiplied by the number of calls your agents do every day, every week. Another key part of this, give your solutions a voice. Make sure that your solutions are able to address the needs that they're designed for. You need to make sure that your voice solution, such as 3CLogic, is going to give you what you need from the communication with. And that has to complement, not contradict, what you get from your system of record, from your sales system, from your collections platform. So your system that accomplishes your business has to be designed to complement with your communication solution so that what you were doing covers succeed. Strategic planning, very critical. It's all about what you know before you start. You need to know exactly why you're doing this. What does your business need that it could improve? What solutions are you going to be migrating from? Do you have a clear understanding of how they work, what the dependencies are, and how, as you migrate, those will change? There's been many times out there, I've seen it myself, where changes are made in a system that should anything in the back office of the company, but when those changes occur, back office processes that have worked for years suddenly stop working or change their behavior. So knowing the solutions that you have now, make sure they're well documented, make sure you're subject matter experts in the company. Ralph, that has been running that system for 15 years, he knows what's going on and can tell he thinks it may impact what he does day by day for the company. Likewise, the business processes. You need to know what is the total life cycle of your business. If you're customer-centric, as most of us are, you need to know all the way from how did I first hear about that customer to how do I manage them as a steady-state client of mine. And that entire life cycle has to be known and ideally documented before you start a migration. And you have to make sure that what you understand there and what you document is going to provide you the knowledge you need to plan for a successful migration. Finally, you have to know your vendors. You have to know their capacity, their staffing, their ability to partner with you. You really can't become a cloud-based company using companies that strictly treat you as a customer. Really need a partnership with them because this is the core of your business. When you move to the cloud, everything you do, your entire operation, is now going to be dependent on the cloud. So all of your vendors, from your internet provider up to your contact center provider to your CRM or your collections platform, you have to know all of those vendors. If it's a current vendor, can they adapt and how will they adapt? If it's a new vendor, really do a deep dive. You don't want to just talk to the salespeople. You want to call into the support staff and ask them questions about, how often do I reach you? How often can you solve problems? Get to know the aspects of your vendors beyond just what a salesperson tells you. Then you need to be planning to leverage the benefits of it. So when you make the migration, if you make a migration and it's the same cost and the same capacity, why did you migrate? Modernization is a great theoretical reason. It's not the case. In today's business, you have to be able to show what is the benefit to my organization for me to make a change. And that's where you can look at not only what do you do now, but also what can't I do that I would like to do. And that's where you want to get into talking to the operations people, not at the executive management level, but down at the middle management. The people that do the work every day, day in and day out, that have to tell you, why did I have a 5% increase in sales or 6% increase in expenses last month? Those are the people that probably have a wish list that they haven't or thought about that, hey, if I could do that, I could do my job so much better and either handle more capacity, reduce our costs, overall improve what the business does. So that's where you need to talk to the right people and find out how can I benefit from a migration like this beyond capacity and reliability. Improving your contact center through the use of partnerships or additional tools is critical. When you have a premise-based solution, quite often, moving into another realm or adding in another service can be challenging. By migrating into the cloud for your core services, those areas like workforce management, where you may not be using it right now, the implementation of that and the adaptation to it in a cloud environment is going to be much more effective and profitable by not having to change everything at once. If somebody wanted to move to the cloud and implement workforce management and do automation of their business processes, I would quite frankly say, okay, let's take these one step at a time. When you change multiple things at one time, you can never be sure which one broke or which one failed. So you plan strategically, you decide what is the best order for the evolutions, and then successfully in that order. Doesn't have to be a lengthy process time-wise. You can do them quickly. But again, your plan has to reflect, how do I do it? How do I inspect it to make sure I have accomplished what I set out to do? And then use that as the entry point or the preconditions for the next step in the evolution. And again, you've got to keep the focus on business-centric at the agent level. That is where all of your efficiencies come into play. When you can save 10 seconds per call and then times 500 agents, that adds up to a lot of man-hours very quickly. And that one-time cost in the implementation pays for itself, once a week, once a month as you move forward. The ROI on that is incredible. It's just having that mindset of, how can I optimize what happens so many times every day, day in and day out? Okay, I do notice that we're getting closer to the end time, and I do want to make sure that we have time for. So, as a recap, you can successfully and quickly migrate to a cloud-based contact center, but you have to do it correctly. You have to prepare for it. You have to understand and leverage the benefits of what you're going to accomplish with the migration, and then you have to look at, what does this open up for me to do as additional use to grow my business or to grow the profitability of the business I have. With that, Guillaume, I'll turn it back over to you for the Q&A session.
So thank you, Robert, for all that insight, and also a big thank you to our guest, Art, for his contributions as well. I realize we only have about 10 minutes left, but I do want to open up the stage for questions. For all attendees, please feel free to use the question box that you have available in your screen and submit any questions to either Robert, Art, or both. And upon receipt, I will forward those questions on and allow both of them to contribute their answers.
Hey, Robert, this is Art. I wanted to, so great set of information to mine. So I think we, kind of gave a real complete set here. I wanted to ask a question about migrations. In your experience with serving your customers at 3CLogic, have you seen, how do they go about, moving the traffic over? On the one extreme end of doing a completely hot cut, and another one where, they sort of, move certain pieces of traffic, certain call types or certain locations, and it's more of a do it over days or maybe even a week or two. But what's your experience been with doing those migrations?
It's migrations, they are very specific to a business, but the key to migration success is making sure that you do it in a phased approach and with the plan for issues and the ability to roll back for it. So a lot of times outbound calling is very easy to migrate. You bring a small portion of your agents over, you get them up and running on generating outbound. Your staff is still in the previous system. And then as that succeeds, you move people over. The most critical place in migration and ensuring continuity of business is on your inbound calling. And the way that, and it is the best way to mitigate the risk for it, is you always set up additional inbound numbers on the new platform, and then you set up so that you can do either real-time or near real-time forwarding of inbound numbers from the legacy platform or carrier into the new platform. You do a port and move the numbers from one carrier or platform to another without having done extensive testing and then production implementation. So you can just extra expense in that 30-day time period, and I usually recommend 30 days for a phased migration of inbound traffic because you're doing forwarding. So you've got the minutes on the losing carrier, minutes on the originating, but when you compare a month's worth of double minutes from that inbound traffic to even a 15-minute outage of your inbound calling, that cost is negligible. And then you go in, you get a day, a two, a week of that inbound traffic using the forwarding method, which you tested thoroughly. Then once everything is good, you start that porting process. And it used to be 60, 90 days to move an inbound number from one carrier to the other. Now I see them happening in less than a week, and very seldom does it take more than 30 days. that phase approach and planning for problems is how you can mitigate it when you're migrating that voice traffic over.
So Robert, thank you for your feedback. I do have some questions here that have since come in. And the first question is, how do you measure ROI or your investment when switching to a SaaS-based model? And if we can perhaps start with Art and then move to Robert and take it in that order.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a great question, and Rob, certainly I'm going to want some of your input here as well. For a lot of organizations that I deal with, first of all, it's you got to do some work to kind of gather up your existing costs so that you know what your existing run state looks like, which is typically your on-prem software, hardware, communication costs, IT staff, and also contact center operations staff to manage all of that, with IT perhaps more responsible for your infrastructure type upgrades. New servers needed, new routers are needed. There's a major new release of software for your ACD that they take ownership of, rolling over to that new release. These costs sometimes are not together, but the better that you can and the better that you understand all of those line items, all of those elements of the current state infrastructure, both from a technology and a people perspective, you're better off. And then you really start to look at, okay, costs, and we may still have some on-prem costs, such as the router connectivity to the cloud contact center, that pipe going into the cloud contact center vendor if you're routing traffic through their center. So then start to line up, and at the end of the day, almost every, I would say probably every cloud contact center provider, has a certain number of models to be able to show the ROI here. Now, certainly that's their model, and it might more readily point in the direction of their solution, but you look at that and then you run it for a certain number out in terms of net present value for this. And so, it really is just lining up and getting all the details of your numbers and looking at that return. And some of it based on the fact that there could be an upside business benefit, that increased agility, being able to address business issues more quickly and readily, and being able to drive some more revenue. That's sometimes a little harder to pull that one into the model and make it stick, but I would encourage you to do that. Rob, any other thoughts?
Yeah, that last point is actually one of the key areas that I was looking at, is opportunity costs or opportunities for improvement. There is not one technology group out there that doesn't have a wish list or things that they should do and would do if they had the time. And part of the benefit you get from migrating to a cloud-based solution is that the role of technology doesn't eliminate, but it changes, and it allows them to focus on some of the other aspects that have never been addressed, either that can improve business, reduce expenses, or allow the business to do things that they just have never been able to before. So that changing role in technology may give you a cost savings, but if it doesn't, and you keep the staff and the capabilities in place, it gives you more opportunity to improve the rest of technology by freeing up their time and resource.
So I realize we are coming up on the 12 o'clock deadline, and I know, Art, you'll have to leave at that period. I'm hoping to just squeeze in one last question that has since come in. We do have a few more afterwards, which I know Robert has offered to stay beyond the 12 o'clock period to answer. But the question is, with the increasing migration towards cloud, what would you suggest for someone looking at cloud solutions? Would it be to move forward or look at simply best of breed options, or is there value in looking at cloud solutions that are a complete suite, basically offer all available features?
So from the charts that I showed earlier, there is a trajectory in the contact center technology space overall towards consolidation into suites. I mean, it's not like it happens in the next week or two. This has been a long-term trend. and it is extremely parallel and similar to what happened in other categories such as CRM and ERP. So the idea of going out, 4 different piece part cloud contact center solutions and then wiring them together, I really don't see that happening all that much at all. This is more, if you're going to go to cloud, you are kind of pointing towards more of that solution anyway, because that's part of the benefit that you get. You're reducing the integration points of pain. I would classically see someone for the agent desktop perhaps using something like, as mentioned earlier by Rob, Zendesk or Salesforce. So there's one cloud, and then the rest of the contact center applications, IVR, ACD, workforce management, et cetera, coming from another cloud provider. So that's 2. I would really struggle going much further beyond that to pick out many best-of-breed parts and lash them all together.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think there's 2 other words that are very important. First one being, there are not a lot of solutions out there that have everything somebody needs. So I think a very important part of it is making sure that the solution you use can bring the right pieces to the table for you. You don't want to go out and integrate your system of record with your contact center and your workforce management and your quality management. So you look for partners that have the flexibility to bring in other best-in-breed solutions into theirs. Recent example we did was when we brought a workforce management solution in that client was very much set on. We brought that integration into 3C so that they brought in 3C as their big solution, bringing in the partners with them and managing that relationship for them. The other key part, I think, is the fact that this is different for every business and every company out there, and it's very critical. We're doing right here are good for information gathering, but you really have to get down to your individual case and evaluate what's right for your company and then use that as your basis point. So that's why, I think it's so critical companies get together one-on-one with their providers and really dive into it. If they say, oh, we've done this 100 times before, be careful, because those other 99 are not like you. There are going to be distinct differences critical to your business.
So we are coming up at the hour mark, and I do realize that we do need to let Art go. With that being said, Robert, we do have some additional questions that hopefully you can stay behind and address. But before we do so, I did want to give Art an opportunity before he goes to provide some closing remarks.
Sure. So everyone, what we hope we've done today is sort of talk about the fact and fiction in terms of what's going on with cloud in specific for contact centers. That there is a movement towards, it's not a complete shift, and certainly these things take time, but what I hoped to lay out was the not only cost angle, but the agility angle of moving your contact center to the cloud. And that as you go about this for IT in terms of inspecting what you expect and what you would govern on a run rate basis out of your cloud contact center provider. So I want to say thanks again to the 3CLogic folks for sponsoring the webinar today, and have a great day, and certainly throw a few more questions at Rob because he's quite capable of answering. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.
Yes, thank you, Art. It was a pleasure, and it was very insightful getting your expertise into this very critical topic.
So, Robert, as I previously mentioned, we do have 1 or 2 remaining questions. And the first being, with the huge migration towards cloud, and specifically as it relates to those considering cloud as a potential solution, what would be, if at all, the ideal size, company size, for those considering cloud as an option? Would it be the small to medium-sized businesses, or is it just as relevant and as valuable for larger enterprises?
It's an excellent question, and I believe it is suited for all sizes of companies. I think that the difference is not so much how big is the company, but how big are their centers and how are they organized and planned. When you look at something like one of the big wires that has a contact center that has 3,000 agents in one campus, or some of the big bankings do that. Those type of major enterprise implementations quite often look at a cloud technology, but in a hybrid environment. They want it to be cloud-based so that they get the benefits, but they want it to be their cloud. They want it to be on the infrastructure. They've already spent the money comparable to what somebody like Amazon has done. And where the flexibility of the partner comes into play, can they get the benefits of it and keep it within their constraints? Financial and medical are two major areas where security is so critical that they may not even consider a public cloud solution, but if the solution fits their needs, they would want to put it into a private or a secure cloud for them. And that, again, is where the vendor has to be flexible enough and able to implement it within inside of their constraints. Going to the other end of the spectrum, cloud is ideally suited for the really small customers. When you look at somebody that has 5 agents, 10 agents, that is just very well suited to the 200 and 500 seats into that more medium, getting into the larger range. It is very important that they have the rest of the processes in place for it so that the cloud gives them all their benefits. You know, when you get 2, 3, 4 internal and external, you need to be able to operate them and manage them as a single solution. And the most effective way to do that is through a cloud-based platform.
So thank you, Robert. We do have one more question that I'd like to ask, and then I think in the interest of time and out of respect for everyone else's time, I think we'll end it there. And that question has to do with something perhaps a little bit more specific than what we've discussed today, but it's in relation to social media. Obviously, with the emphasis on multi-channel communications, social media has been getting quite a bit of attention with regards to its role and whether or not it is perhaps posing a threat to the more traditional means of communication, notably voice and email. So if you could weigh in on what you think or where you think social media is headed, and perhaps how relevant is it in today's contact center?
Social media in the contact center is very similar to the term cloud in that it means something, talks about it. You know, there's not one of the reasons you don't see a strong surge into social media in the contact center is because there's no clearly defined objective or standard for it. When you look back at what Art was presenting as far as the keys for unified communications, voice is still far and above the clear winner, followed by email and then chat. And those are communications mediums, not social media mediums. Now, the best approach I've seen for social media utilizes all three of those. And where you have your social media, be it your Facebook page for the you set up so that those come into those 3 core channels. If we're talking about a Facebook page, well, part of your drop-in on it is going to be your web chat into the contact center, or your click, and you're driving the people on social media to reach out to an agent in a one-on-one communication about what they were going to put on that page or came to that page looking for. Likewise, when you're looking at social media, you've got to make sure that what you're doing with social media from the marketing perspective is a generic approach or more mass communication to the customers. Social media is not a one-on-one. Even with Twitter, if you've got somebody that's hitting your Twitter or you've got a hashtag out there, good or bad, related to your company, you want that to come in a way that an individual agent can respond to an individual person. So I think that social media is still not very well adapted to the contact center, only because it's apples and oranges. And by utilizing which are strong platforms and communications mediums for the contact center, they can cover the social media realm correctly.
So thank you, Robert. And I think that's going to conclude today's webinar. I want to thank both Art and Robert for taking the time out of their day to offer their insights on the contact center space and some of the things to look forward to and how to plan accordingly. I also want to thank all the attendees for taking the time out of their day for joining us. We do host regular webinars, so in the event that you found this one interesting, please stay in touch, and hopefully we'll have you join us again in the future. In the event you have any specific questions relating to 3CLogic and our cloud contact center solution, we certainly welcome the opportunity to speak with you. Feel free to reach out to us directly, or you can certainly find out more on our website at www.3clogic.com. We have recorded the event and we will be forwarding it to all interested parties. But otherwise, again, thank you to all, and I wish everyone a great afternoon.